American intelligence agencies use influence mapping on their targeted victims to map out, by data mining, a person or a group's emails, phone calls, etc. Your social circle and family circle, to find out who it is in your circle of family and friends who is most important to you and who have the most influence over you. They then target those people with negative associative conditioning, so that every time you come around or call, etc., something bad happens, such as a sudden attack of nausea or headaches, directed energy attacks against family or friends, or their car breaks down or pet dies, etc. Until those people in your life who are important to you begin to correlate and identify all of those negative events with your personal presence and begin to avoid you like the plague. This causes those friends and family, pastor, teacher, employer, etc., to leave you and abandon you, or to make them become your enemy because of those false correlations. This is how they isolate the trauma-based mind control victim. Negative associative conditioning is a psychocybernetic protocol involving behavior modification, which is very important in trauma-based mind control technologies. It depends on reinforcers, or consequences, to strengthen or weaken a given behavior, similar to Pavlov's dogs. For example, a child may learn to open a box to get the candy inside, or learn to avoid touching a hot stove, behavior modification. In trauma-based mind control, it's called behavior modification to death. Not behavior modification, but behavior modification to death. What the CIA DIA hive mind teams do is they use negative associative conditioning to isolate you by using a pain stimulus, physical or psychological, or negative reinforcer or consequence against the family member or friend every time you come around or attempt to touch base with them by different means of communication. So each time you call or come over to visit, something negative or terrible will happen to them enough times until that person begins to falsely associate and falsely correlate you with all those negative events and begins to avoid you or becomes your enemy. After it happens enough times, that person will begin to falsely correlate you with those physically and / or psychologically painful events and will begin to avoid you like the plague, or turn against you and become your enemy, believing you ruined their lives or deliberately hurt them in some way. It's called negative associative conditioning, and it's a process which is easily achievable in just a very short few weeks or months. This is how influence mapping and negative associative conditioning works and is used against mind control victims, and is just an example, as the CIA DIA hive mind teams use it in various ways to isolate the victim, including to deceive and manipulate the mind control victim into false correlations that others are attacking them with cell phones, ray guns, etc. Because every time that person comes around, the mind control victim is attacked with directed energy and suffers pain and trauma or remote neural attacks in connection with street theater, situational scenarios and conversational scenarios, based on events or topics they know will capture the mind control victim's attention. So the mind control victim is convinced the neighbor is attacking him, or a family member, friend, co-worker, etc., because, for example, every time the neighbor comes home from work at around 5 p.m. in the evening, for example, the trauma-based mind control victim is attacked with directed energy. So, then, it is not necessary to isolate the victim from everyone in the world, as that is not possible, nor is it practical, unless they can set up and frame the mind control victim and have them thrown into prison or a mental institution, and even then it becomes problematic. No, all that is necessary to fully isolate the trauma-based mind control victim is to map out their social circle. Finding out who is important or influential in their lives, and then utilize influence mapping and negative associative conditioning in order to isolate them from family and friends and any support networks they may have or seek to build, such as church, school, etc. So this story is from when I was about 12 years old. I am 18 now. The setting of this story is around January and in rural Minnesota. If anyone's ever been around here, you'd know there isn't anything around besides trees, farmland, and snow in upper Minnesota. One day about an hour before sunset, my brother and I were playing outside in the snow as usual, and I decide I want to go explore the woods and make a fort. My brother was a very paranoid little kid, so he wouldn't come with me. As I'm trekking through our little snow-covered alfalfa field towards the woods, right in front of me is tiny bare footprints, human footprints. I look behind me to see where they came from, the road. Before anyone says deer tracks look similar to human feet, again, I live in rural Minnesota. I've seen deer tracks almost 100 times before that. Also, these steps look bipedal, walking on two legs. We have no neighbors for at least a 3/4 of a mile as well. As I'm looking at these tracks, I see that they lead to the woods. I followed those footprints for about a 1/4 mile into the woods. I started feeling sick as I saw the footprints cross a barbed wire fence without a sign of struggle and straight into a big brush pile of what I assumed someone dumped there at some point. Was something leading me here? I didn't want to know. I look at the brush pile one more time to see that the child's footprints never left the brush. I ran all the way home as I feel I was being watched. Thinking back on it, I wish I explored that brush pile, but at the same time, who knows what I would have found. About 2 years ago, my older sister would spend almost all of her time in her bedroom. I was an annoying sister, so whenever she was in there, I would love to pop my head in and say hello. She was never that annoyed by me hanging out, but I started to realize that I couldn't spend much time in there without feeling sick. I would either get headaches or start to feel nauseous. My sisters and I used to joke about this and say that my sister's room just had bad vibes. After a while, we started to notice that our dogs also wouldn't spend more than a couple minutes in her bedroom at a time. After a while, I started to notice things about my sister's behavior. She slept with her door open and her lights on. She always seemed drained, and honestly was becoming quite paranoid. She admitted to thinking that she would hear things, voices, whispers, etc. Our grandmother lives with us and is quite religious. Apparently one day my grandma was in my sister's closet hanging up clothes for her and felt something breath in her ear. I didn't witness this, but my 2 oldest sisters said that they heard our grandma screaming and crying from downstairs. They both went to check on her and found her pacing my sister's bedroom with a Bible and in her hand, yelling at whatever was in her bedroom that it wasn't welcomed. I don't get headaches or nausea in that room anymore, and the dogs feel comfortable enough to take naps in there.
Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang. Heard you guys like eating Tide Pods. I should be here to tell you that's wrong. Not that I blame you all anyways. I'm such a snack, wouldn't you say?